When my grandson looked me in the eye and said, "You embarrass me in front of my friends," I didn't say a word. I just smiled, closed the door behind me, and left. 2 days later, he called me 19 times, but I didn't pick up. Sometimes silence teaches louder than words ever could. My name is Harold Miller. I'm 72 years old, a retired school principal, and a widower. My daughter passed away when her little boy, Ethan, was only 5. From that day on, I promised her I'd raise him to be kind, respectful, and honest. And for years, that promise was all I lived for. Ethan and I shared everything: pancake breakfasts on Sundays, small fishing trips in the summer, and late-night talks about life. He was my reason to keep going after I buried my only child. Every time I looked at him, I saw her smile. But lately, things had changed. Ethan had grown into a tall, confident 17-year-old, and I started to notice the distance building between us. It began in small ways. He stopped joining me for breakfast. He'd rush out of the house without saying goodbye. When I'd ask how school was, he'd mumble, "Fine," and disappear into his room. I told myself it was just teenage stuff, that all kids go through a phase, but deep down, I knew I was losing him. I still tried to be part of his world. I'd drive him to basketball practice, pack his lunch, and cheer him on at every game. He'd look embarrassed when I waved from the bleachers, but I didn't mind. I thought he secretly liked it. I was wrong. One Friday afternoon, I decided to surprise him. I bought 2 large pepperoni pizzas, his favorite, and headed to the park where he usually hung out with his friends after practice. I imagined his face lighting up when he saw me. Maybe he'd even introduce me proudly, the way he used to when he was younger. When I reached the park, I saw Ethan standing with a group of boys near the benches, laughing and joking around. For a moment, I felt proud watching him. He looked happy, confident. I called out, "Hey champ, look what I got for you." I held up the pizza box with a smile. The laughter around him stopped. His friends turned to look. One of them snickered, whispering something to another boy. Ethan froze. His smile vanished, and I could see the panic in his eyes. "Grandpa, what are you doing here?" he said quickly. I chuckled, thinking he was joking. "Thought I'd bring you something to eat, your favorite." But he didn't smile. Instead, he clenched his jaw and muttered under his breath, "You embarrass me in front of my friends." The words hit me like a hammer. For a second, I couldn't move. His friends stood there awkwardly, some pretending not to hear, others exchanging quiet laughs. Ethan looked down, refusing to meet my eyes. I forced a small smile and said quietly, "All right, son, I understand." Then I turned around, walked back to my car, and drove away. I don't remember much of that drive. Home. The streets looked blurry, like the world had suddenly lost its color. When I got back to the house, I placed the untouched pizza boxes on the kitchen table and sat down in silence. The chair across from me, the one Ethan usually sat in, was empty. I stared at it for a long time. That night, I went into his room. His sneakers were scattered on the floor, his backpack half open. On the nightstand was a framed photo of the 3 of us, me, Ethan, and my daughter. She was smiling, her arm around both of us. I picked it up and whispered, "I tried, Claire. I really did." The next morning, I didn't wake Ethan up for breakfast like I usually did. I let him sleep in. When he came downstairs, I was already gone for my morning walk. I needed space to breathe, to think. Linda, my next-door neighbor, saw me sitting on the park bench later that day. She asked if I was okay. I smiled and said, "Just getting some air." I didn't tell her the truth, that my heart felt heavier than it ever had before. That evening, Ethan came home late. I heard him laughing on the phone with one of his friends. He walked right past my room without saying goodnight. I sat in the dark, wondering when being a grandfather became something to be ashamed of. For years, I believed love was enough to keep family close. But that night, I realized something painful. Sometimes love needs distance to be seen. Before you continue watching, I want to ask you something. Have you ever loved someone who made you feel unwanted? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more stories that remind us what really matters in life. The morning after that painful moment in the park, the house felt emptier than it ever had before. I made breakfast as usual, scrambled eggs, toast, and black coffee, but only one plate was used. Ethan left early for school, not saying a word, not even looking my way. The silence in that small kitchen was louder than anything I had ever heard. For 17 years, I had built my world around him. Every chore, every meal, every routine was tied to the thought of making his life easier. But now, for the first time, I started to wonder if maybe I had made it too easy for him to forget how much I cared. That day, I spent most of my time sitting on the front porch. The autumn wind carried the smell of dry leaves and distant rain. Linda, my neighbor, came over with her usual cup of tea. She was a widow too, and she had known me since Ethan was a toddler. She sat beside me and said softly, "You look troubled, Harold. Something happened?" I hesitated, then told her what Ethan had said. She listened quietly, her eyes filled with sympathy. When I finished, she shook her head. "He's just a boy trying to impress his friends. They do stupid things when they're young. Don't let it break your heart." I smiled faintly. "It's not anger, Linda. It's disappointment. I raised him better than that. And it hurts to realize he's ashamed of me." She placed her hand gently on my arm. "He'll come around. You've given that boy everything. He just doesn't see it yet." I wanted to believe her, but inside, I knew something deeper was happening. It wasn't just a moment of embarrassment. It was a reflection of who he was becoming. Someone who valued appearances more than people. Someone who thought love was something you could hide when it wasn't convenient. That night, I tried to talk to him. When he came home from basketball practice, I was sitting at the table waiting. "Ethan," I said, "can we talk for a minute?" He looked annoyed. "I'm tired, Grandpa." "Can it wait?" "It can," I said quietly, "but I'd rather it didn't." He sighed and dropped his backpack on the floor. "Okay, what is it?" I took a deep breath. "I know you're growing up, and I know your friends mean a lot to you, but I also need you to understand it isn't something you hide when it doesn't fit your image. I might wear fancy clothes, but I've given you everything I could. Not for thanks, but out of love." He crossed his arms. "Grandpa, it's not that serious. You just don't understand. Kids might. It's different." I nodded slowly. "You're right. Maybe I don't understand, but I do understand respect. And one day, you'll wish you'd thrown it away so easily." He rolled his eyes. "You're overreacting." Then he walked away, leaving me at the table alone again. The sound of his door closing upstairs hit me harder than his words ever could. For the next few days, I barely saw him. He'd leave early, come home late, eat in his room, and pretend I wasn't there. I stopped trying to reach out. I thought maybe he needed space to realize he'd done. But the truth was, that space began to change me too. I found myself thinking about my late daughter more often. When she was alive, she would have never let her son speak that way. She used to say, "Dad, one day you'll see, kids don't always show it, but they love deeply." I wanted to believe that. I really did. But every empty meal and unanswered question made that belief harder to hold on to. One night, I walked into Ethan's room while he was out. It wasn't to invade his privacy, I just missed him. His desk with school books and sports magazines. In the corner, I noticed a dusty old photo of the two of us, his first basketball game. He was 8 years old, sitting on my shoulder, a trophy with the biggest smile I'd ever seen. I touched the frame gently and whispered, "Where did that boy go?" The next morning, I made a decision. I needed time away, time to think, to heal, and maybe to teach Ethan something life. I packed a small duffel, took my and stood by the doorway to leave a note, but I didn't. I wanted him to feel the absence, to notice what silence feels like when the person who loves you most isn't there to fill it anymore. I locked the door behind me and got in the car. As I drove through the empty streets, the memories played in my mind like a movie. The nights I stayed up when he was sick, the mornings I packed his lunch, the times I clapped the loudest at his games. I realized I had spent so much of my life giving love that I never thought I'd have to step back to remind someone what it means. By the time I reached the small lake cabin my wife and I once owned, the sun was setting. The air smelled of pine and water, the kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. I sat on the porch, watching the reflection of the trees ripple across the lake, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel angry. I just felt tired. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew this much. Ethan needed to understand what it means to lose someone before he could truly appreciate what it means to love them. and that understanding was about to come sooner than he expected. I woke up early the next morning and surrounded by stillness. The air smelled of damp wood, and the light from the lake shimmered through the window, a quiet promise. It had been years since I'd been there. My late wife, Margaret, loved this place. She used to say the cabin had a way of healing broken hearts. Maybe that's why I needed space to breathe, away from the house filled with memories, and away from the silence Ethan had turned into a wall between us. I spent the first day in quiet work. I fixed the loose hinges on the back door, swept dust from the floor, and cooked myself a simple breakfast of eggs and coffee. For a while, I didn't think about Ethan at all. But then, I began to even notice that thought cut deeper than his words ever had. I had spent 17 years. Now, I wasn't even part of his day. Back at home, my phone sat where I left it, switched on. I wanted to disconnect from everything. No calls, no texts. I just wanted peace. But I didn't realize then how that silence would echo. By the second evening, I was sitting whittling a habit. The sun was dipping low, the lake in gold. That's when I gravel under tires. For a second, my heart jumped. But when I turned, it was only Linda's old station. She stepped out, holding a grocery bag. "I thought I might find you here," she said with a small smile. "Ethan's been looking for." Her expression softened. "He's worried. He came and asked if I'd seen you. Said you didn't come tonight. You didn't leave a note or answer his calls." I looked down at the ground. "He'll be fine. Maybe he needs to feel what absence is like to understand presence." Linda nodded slowly. "Maybe. But don't make the boys suffer too long. You're all he's got." After she left, I sat on the porch steps, thinking about her words. I didn't want to punish Ethan. I only wanted him to realize what love looks like when it's gone. Still, something in my chest began to ache, a quiet tug of worry I couldn't ignore. Meanwhile, miles away, Ethan's world was unraveling. When he first noticed I wasn't home, he assumed I'd gone for groceries or a walk. But when hours turned to days, fear replaced indifference. He found my phone on the bedside table, still plugged in, and my wallet on the dresser. The realization hit him like a punch. This wasn't an errand. I had left. He called everyone he could think of, 19 calls in total. The first few were angry. "Where are you, Grandpa?" But the later ones were desperate, trembling with guilt and fear. He called Linda, the neighbors, even the local hospital, asking if a man matching my description had been admitted. No one knew anything. The silence he once used to shut me out was now swallowing him whole. The second night without me, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched dinner he'd made for two. He scrolled through old photos on his phone, birthday parties, fishing trips, and that picture from the park years ago, where he stood proudly beside me, holding a basketball trophy. The same man he had called an embarrassment was the one who had never missed a single moment of his life. He pressed his palms to his face and whispered, "What did I do?" By the time Linda told him about the cabin, he didn't hesitate. He grabbed his car keys and drove off into the night. It was almost dawn when I heard a car pulling into the driveway. I didn't move right away. Part of me wanted to let him find the note I'd written instead of me. But when I saw the headlights flicker through the trees and the sound of a car door slam, I felt my heart shift. The cabin door creaked open, and Ethan's voice broke the silence. "Grandpa, are you here?" I stayed quiet at first. I wanted to see what he would do. His footsteps echoed through the small room. I could hear his breath quick and shaky. He spotted the letter on the table and froze. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside, I had written, "Ethan, I'm not angry. I just needed time to think. You once told me I embarrassed you. Maybe love looks embarrassing when you don't understand it yet. I didn't leave to make you feel guilty, but so you'd realize how much presence matters before life teaches you the hard way what absence feels like." When I stepped out onto the porch, he was standing there, tears streaking down his face, the letter crumpled in his hand. His voice cracked. "I'm sorry, Grandpa. I didn't mean it. I was stupid." I looked at him for a long moment, then said softly, "You're not stupid. You're young, and now you understand what I couldn't teach you with words." He walked toward me, his shoulders trembling, and before I could say anything more, he threw his arms around me. The warmth of that hug felt like the first breath after being underwater for too long. We stood there, 2 generations bound not by blood alone, but by lessons learned through pain and love. That night, for the first time in days, I didn't feel lonely anymore. I felt something better, understood. The first light of morning spread across the lake, turning the ripples gold. The air smelled of rain and pine, and the mist hung low around the trees. Ethan and I stood outside the cabin, still holding on to each other like time had finally stopped moving for both of us. I could feel his heartbeat against my chest, fast, anxious, and full of regret. It had been so long since he hugged me like that. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were red and swollen, and his voice trembled when he spoke. "Grandpa, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean what I said that day. I was just trying to fit in. My friends, they make fun of me for not having parents, for living with you. I wanted to feel normal, and I raised my hand gently to stop him. Ethan, stop right there. You don't have to explain to me why you said it. I know what it's like to want to belong, but you need to understand something. Shame is a seed. Once you plant it, it grows fast, and before you know it, it chokes the love that keeps you grounded." He looked down at the ground, kicking at the dirt, too ashamed to meet my eyes. "I hurt you," he whispered. "You did," I said quietly, "but not because of what you said. You hurt me because I realized I'd failed to teach you something important. That family of your status, it's a reflection of your heart." He finally looked up. "You didn't fail me, Grandpa. I just forgot what really matters. When I came and saw the house, I thought I'd lost you too. I kept hoping you'd answer. I thought maybe you were mad or something had happened." His voice cracked. 19 times. I called 19 times. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words settle my chest. "You know, Ethan, when your mother was alive, she used to say that one day I'd teach you everything she couldn't. But maybe it's not my lessons you needed. It's your own mistakes." He nodded, wiping his tears. "I didn't understand what it means to lose someone until now." We sat down on the porch steps together. The wood was rough beneath us, but the quiet around us was peaceful. The birds began to wake, their calls echoing across the water. For a while, neither of us spoke. We just sat there, 2 generations connected by silence. Not the cold kind that builds walls, but the gentle kind that heals. After a few minutes, Ethan spoke again, his voice softer. "You know what scared me the most? The idea that I'd pushed you away for good, that maybe you'd gotten tired of forgiving me." I smiled faintly. A grandfather doesn't get tired of forgiving. He just gets tired of being invisible. Ethan nodded slowly, his face full of guilt. "You were never invisible. I was just too blind to see." I placed my hand on his shoulder. "You're not the first young man to lose his way. I was your age once. I made my share of mistakes too. But you have something I didn't. You have a chance to make things right while you still can." He turned toward me, his expression full of sincerity. "I want to make it right. I want to be better." "Then start by remembering this," I said firmly. "Respect doesn't come from how others see you. It comes from how you treat the people who stood by you when no one else would." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "I understand now. I really do." The morning sun broke through the clouds, spreading light across the lake. It felt like a small sign, like the world itself was forgiving both of us. Ethan stood up and looked around the cabin, smiling faintly. "This place is beautiful. Mom used to talk about it, didn't she?" "She did," I said. "She loved it here. Said it was where she felt closest to your grandma. We built this porch together when he was your age." Ethan rang the wooden rail, tracing the old... "You carved her initials here, didn't you?" "Both of theirs," I said with a grin. "Your grandma and your mom, 2 of the strongest women I ever knew." He turned back toward me, his voice soft but steady. "Can we come here if you fix it up? Maybe we could spend weekend like you and Mom used to." Hearing that, my heart went, "I'd like that, son, more than you know." We spent the rest of that morning together. I taught him how to repair the loose porch boards. He helped me chop firewood, laughing every time his swing went too wide. It wasn't perfect. He was clumsy, and I was slow, but it was real. It felt like life was giving us a second chance. Before we left that afternoon, Ethan pulled his phone. "Grandpa, can we take a picture together? For once, I want my friends to see who raised me." That caught me off guard. I smiled and stood beside him. The camera clicked, capturing something more than an image. It caught a moment of forgiveness, pride, and love. When he posted it later, the caption simply read, "This man taught me what love really means." On the drive home, Ethan talked the whole way, about school, basketball, college plans, and even about his mother. I listened quietly, my heart full. I didn't interrupt. I didn't need to. When we pulled into the driveway, he turned off the engine and said, "Grandpa, thank you for not giving up on me." I smiled at him and replied, "That's not something love ever does." As I stepped out of the car, I looked up at the sky in gold by the setting sun and whispered a quiet thank you to my daughter. Her boy had found his way back, not through punishment, but through understanding. That night, as I sat by the window, I realized something simple, yet powerful. Love doesn't always need words. Sometimes it just needs distance, silence, and the courage to wait for someone to remember what truly matters. The weeks that followed that morning at the cabin changed everything between Ethan and me. Our home, once filled with silence and distance, began to feel alive again. He no longer rushed out the door every morning or locked himself away in his room. Instead, he joined me for breakfast, sometimes cooking pancakes the way his mother used to. We talked more, not just about school or chores, but about life. He'd ask questions about his mom, about the kind of person she was, and what she used to dream about. For the first time in years, I saw genuine curiosity in his eyes, not impatience. Every evening, we sat on the porch together. Sometimes we talked, other times we just watched the sky fade from gold to deep blue. It was in those quiet moments that I felt my heart begin to heal. There was something sacred about sitting beside him, knowing that all the hurt, all the misunderstandings had led to this, a bond stronger than before. One night, while we were watching the stars, Ethan said something that stayed with me. "You know, Grandpa, I used to think you were old-fashioned. I thought you didn't understand how the world works now. But I get it now. You weren't trying to control me. You were trying to keep me from losing myself." I smiled, feeling a lump in my throat. "That's all I ever wanted, son. For you to remember where you come from and who you are." He nodded and leaned back in his chair. "I don't think I'll ever forget again." A few days later, I found a handwritten note on my nightstand. It was from Ethan. He wrote, "I don't say it enough, but thank you for everything. You gave up your life so I could have one. I promise I'll make you proud." The words were simple, but they meant more to me than anything else I could have asked for. I folded the note carefully and placed it inside the same old photo frame that held our family picture, the one I used to stare at when I felt alone. Now, that frame didn't make me sad anymore. It reminded me that love, though fragile, always finds its way back home. As time passed, our roles slowly began to reverse. I wasn't the caretaker anymore. Ethan was becoming one. He'd insist on driving me to doctor appointments, helping with groceries, or fixing small things in the house. At first, I resisted. It was hard to accept from the same boy I once bathed and fed, but then I realized something beautiful. This was what growth looked like. This was love coming full circle. One Saturday morning, Ethan surprised me again. He said he wanted to take me somewhere. I didn't ask questions. I just followed. We drove for an hour, and when we stopped, I recognized the place instantly. It was the park where everything had fallen apart. That day I brought him pizza. The basketball court was empty. The trees had grown taller, and the same old bench where I'd sat holding that pizza box was still there. He walked up to it, placed a fresh pizza box on the seat, and turned to me with a shy smile. "I thought we could rewrite the memory," he said. I felt tears burn in my eyes as we sat down together. He opened the box, handed me a slice, and said, "This time, I want everyone to see who you are. My grandfather, my hero." We ate quietly for a moment, and I couldn't stop smiling. The same place that once held my deepest pain now held one of my happiest memories. It was proof that time and love really can heal almost anything. Later that afternoon, a group of Ethan's friends showed up to play basketball. To my surprise, he called them over and introduced me. "This is my grandpa," he said proudly. "He used to be a school principal, the smartest man I know." The boys greeted me warmly, and one of them said, "We've heard about you, sir. Ethan always talks about how you raised him." That moment felt like redemption, not just for me, but for Ethan too. He had learned to stand by his family, to carry love instead of shame. Watching him laugh with his friends, I realized something that I think every parent and grandparent eventually learns. Raising a child isn't about making them perfect. It's about planting values deep enough that even when they lose their way, they'll find the path back on their own. Months passed, and our bond only grew stronger. We spent the summer fixing up the cabin together. He painted the walls while I repaired the roof. We'd take breaks by the lake, talking about his plans for college and his dream of studying architecture. "I want to build homes that feel like yours, Grandpa," he said one afternoon. "Places that hold stories, not just walls." Hearing that made me prouder than any award or title ever could. Sometimes, when I sit by the window in the evenings, I think back to that day he said those hurtful words. At the time, I thought it would break me, but now I see it differently. That moment wasn't the end of our relationship. It was the beginning of his understanding. Some lessons can't be taught through comfort. They're learned through pain, through loss, and through the realization that love never truly leaves. It just waits to be recognized. I know I won't be here forever. Life has its seasons, and mine is nearing autumn. But I take comfort in knowing Ethan will carry everything I've taught him about kindness, humility, and love that doesn't need to be seen to be felt. And when the time comes for him to tell his own story, maybe he'll say, "My grandfather once walked away so I could learn how to walk back," because that's all this story really is, a journey back home. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more stories that remind us of the power of love, forgiveness, and family. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and who in your life deserves a call today before it's too late.